Welcome everyone. Let's begin with our Pledge of Allegiance. We'd like to ask if everyone to please stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to the Westwood Planning Board meeting. Tonight's
Oh, here. Or do you want to use this one? This one easier?
Okay. It's not on.
So these ones are for the TV. So this one is for when you have to talk, so it can be heard in the room.
Right.
So maybe if you two share that one, maybe you two share.
Welcome to the Westwood Planning Board meeting. My name is Dave Atkins, and I will be chairing this meeting. The meeting is video recorded by Westwood Media Center. If anyone else wishes to record the meeting, please identify yourself so that the audience is aware. As a friendly reminder, please turn off your cell phone ringers. The meeting will be civil, and all people will be treated respectfully. This includes, please, no clapping, booing, or interruptions from the audience. In the event of a disruption, the chair will give a warning the first time, and if it occurs again, the individual will be ordered to leave the meeting. The format of the meeting is that when an item is called, the applicant will come forward to the podium to present their application to the board. The board will proceed to staff comments, and board members will ask questions of the applicant. For public hearing items, the public will be given an opportunity to comment. Items that are not a public hearing, the opportunity for public comment will be at the discretion of the board. When it's time for public comment period, the chair will call those wishing to speak to the podium and use the microphone. Once at the podium, please identify yourself by stating your name and address for the record. Please direct all comments and questions through the chair. All people will be given the opportunity to speak, but in the interest of time and fairness, repetitive or off-topic comments may be cut short. And I would just note that there was a mistake in the printing of the notice for this meeting. So prior to this coming here, three of us met at the other location, which was the Thurston Middle School, which has been posted with signs directing people to come here for the planning board meeting. We met there and continued all of the public hearing items to this meeting at this location. So just to protect the procedural safeguards of that. And there was no one there at the time. So first of all, are there any changes to our agenda?
There are no changes.
So we will follow, I think we already go through the procedure. We'll go through the agenda items here. The first item on the agenda is the Master Development Plan Special Permit University Station public hearing to amend the approved Master Development Plan for Development Area A for 2 office buildings. And Mr. Sincata, if you will like to begin.
Good evening, Paul Sincata with New England Development, here representing the University Station development team. Here this evening have the same team that we had before the board at our first presentation for the proposed office development up on the upper campus, from National Development, Katie Snyder, from our architectural firm, SGA, Jeff Tompkins, our civil site engineer, Nate Cheel, from Shadley, our landscape architect, John Gwads, and Brian Dugdale from Goulston. So there are 2 matters before the board this evening that relate to the proposed 145,000 square feet of office that's proposed on the upper campus at University Station. One is, which we'll take up first, is a special permit for a modification to the master plan, and then the second is a PDR. So we'll start with the modification to the master plan. So the purpose of the special permit application is to modify the amount of square footage of office that's being proposed up on the upper campus. The upper campus on this slide is outlined in red, and this particular color rendered plan of the entire development represents the master plan as it's approved today prior to this modification. And you may recall this configuration dates back to the original approval of the master plan back in 2013. Showed 3 office buildings up on the upper campus, totals about 225,000 square feet of office development. The proposed modification that's before you this evening is to only construct 2 office buildings in the same area of the upper campus. This upper campus is about 11.5 acres in total. The building, as you recall, that we talked about regarding the PDR application in the April 2nd meeting is a 4-story, 100,000 square foot building about centrally located on the upper campus plateau. And then a second office building of about 45,000 square feet is on the north end. Special permit application looks at, well, before we get into the criteria, you may recall from the original zoning, this is the actual master development plan. So this configuration has been modified on the upper campus to show the two office buildings. And if approved, this actual master development plan, which accompanies zoning, will be modified to show the 2 buildings instead of the 3 buildings. The balance of the master development plan essentially reflects what's out there today with all the retail space, the Gables residential project, the lower campus hotel, the Brigham building, the Pulte buildings under construction, the recently approved office building next to Not Your Average Joe's, which is the 40,000 square foot office building the board approved a couple of months ago. And then certainly the other pieces of the development, the restaurants at the north end, Lifetime Fitness at the south end. So within the special permit application that was filed before the board, there are 2 sets of criteria that need to be met. I'll just quickly walk through them. They're detailed in the application in terms of how this modification of a reduction in office space from about 225 to 145,000, which is an 80,000 foot reduction on the upper campus, does not negatively impact or weigh in a negative way against these criteria. We'll also see a little bit further down in the presentation, there are also some design and performance standards that need to be tested in the special permit application. So the reduction in office space, because the original master plan called for 100% of office use up on that upper campus, we're simply reducing the amount of office space. It really has little to no impact on a number of these criteria, social, economic, and community needs. It's still serving the purpose of bringing a mix of office space to the development, traffic flow, safety, parking, and all, where it's less intensive in terms of square footage. I think it's intuitive that there are no impacts associated with that. Because the utilities and other public services were planned for a little bit more square footage, a little less square footage does not present a problem in terms of being able to provide services to the development. The character and aesthetics to the neighborhood really are the same where it is an office use in that part of the development. And you may recall back at the master plan stages in 2012 and 13, there was a real strong interest for this portion of the development to be strictly office and R&D space. Impacts on the natural environment, there's no change there. And then any potential fiscal impact, which we'll dive into a little bit more in detail in the next couple of slides. There was a fiscal update that was provided as part of the special permit application. As a reminder, in 2012, 2013, when the project was seeking its initial master plan approval, there was a fiscal impact study that was prepared. It's actually dated early 2013. It was prepared by Connery Associates, so we refer to it as the Connery Report. That report most recently was updated in March of 17 and then in late December of 17. those two updates, which were prepared by Fougere Associates, were done in connection with one, when the master plan was modified down in the lower campus, or what we sometimes refer to as the village area. And then following that, there was another fiscal update done to address the 100 condo units that are under construction right now by Pulte Homes. In the most recent update, which is December of 17, this update relies on some cost data that, as you've probably noticed in reading the fiscal update, that we're pulling cost data that was generated from the late 17 report, and one of the things that we wanted to do in this current update is take a look at what taxes are being generated by the development today in its currently constructed and approved state. So all of the elements of the project that have been constructed to date are generating almost $8 million in tax revenues today. And then we added estimates of what the two projects that were recently approved and under construction, the 100 units of condominiums by Pulte Homes and the 40,000 square foot Makita office building, which was recently approved. Construction there is anticipated to begin early in May. So when you add another expected $1 million of tax revenue generated from those two elements that are in construction, it really brings the total tax revenues generated for what has been approved and built to date to about $9 million. We then took a look at what the 145,000 square feet of office space would generate up on the upper campus, and that happens to be about another $1 million. A little bit more than $1 million is the anticipated value of taxes that are created there, and then added, when that $1 million is added to the almost $9 million that's essentially in place today, we're able to compare the total tax revenues of the project from the initial 2013 report, which was projected to be around $7,000, the December 2017 update that we talked about earlier is represented in the middle column, and a new projection based on a build out of the 145,000 feet of space on the upper campus that we're talking about this evening, added to what's already in place. So the fiscal impact has been sort of fortunate and blessed, where the revenue projections have consistently been exceeding those that were made in 2013. The costs are expected to be for the entire project on the order of $2 million. So it brings our net fiscal impact up to around $8 million when it was initially anticipated to be closer to $5 million. RKG, I think, as you probably have reviewed at this point, took a look at the update and has prepared some peer review comments and are in general accord that it is certainly fiscally positive. I think they took a very conservative approach and said, what if the $1.95 million in costs do not include costs associated with the office? When you go back and you look at the 2017 report, this $1.95 million in costs certainly anticipated a full build-out, but I think that RKG took a little bit of a conservative approach and added costs on top of the $1.95 million associated solely with office, and attributed about another $250,000 of costs potentially on top of that. So clearly still very much fiscally positive. The last thing that the special permit for reducing the amount of square footage of office up on the upper campus needs to look at is about a dozen or so different performance and design standards, and I won't go through them individually. They're detailed in the site permit application, and I think that many of them sort of jump out as not being negatively impacted. Things like FAR and gross floor area limitations in height, none of those are being proposed in a way where they're exceeding what was already anticipated in the master plan. Other things like signage and parking and loading, building design and screening, all of those I think have been adequately covered in the PDR application. Some of the items we're still working on and are even part of the draft decision that we've been looking at for the last couple days. Utilities, again, because we're reducing the amount of square footage, there are no negative impacts there. The use is consistent with the master development plan. The office use is consistent with that. So everything from traffic generation, compatibility with its surrounds, and those sorts of things are all consistent. Even stormwater management design, all consistent with the approved master plan. I think that's all we have for the special permit application, fairly straightforward. One thing that I will point out, I think it was a question that was raised in the first presentation, just as a point of clarification, the master plan originally contemplated or part of the approved square footage in the master plan, the office element was 325,000 feet. So sort of a quick tally of where we are relative to the 325,000 feet, given that we're proposing 80,000 feet less up on the upper campus. What's approved, presuming the 145,000 feet are approved on the upper campus, the 145,000 feet here would be added to 120,000 square feet that's approved in the lower campus. You'll recall that Brigham and Women's was approved at 80,000 feet. 30 is constructed today, and expectation is they'll build out to 80,000 in the near term, and then the 40,000 feet for Makita. So 120 in the lower campus, 145 in the upper campus gets us to 265,000 feet, leaves us about 60,000 feet away from the master planned amount of 325,000 feet, with still some area left in the development for future development opportunities, namely next to the 40,000-foot building that was recently approved. Happy to take any questions on the special permit application.
Thank you. So in a nutshell, basically this part of the approval or this special permit is for us to decide whether making the project smaller hurts the town. From the original plan of the master development plan, this will be a smaller, 2 buildings instead of 3, and we're reviewing all those the impacts of that, more against the idea that if we make it smaller, is that going to harm what was originally intended?
Correct.
Do we have, Abby, did we want to have any peer review or anyone else?
Yes, we did. We have America Beta Group is here, and they did touch a little bit during their PDR review of the office building on Next. They did not expect any or have any concerns related to the site traffic or parking circulation with the reduction in the office building. And then, as Paul mentioned, you did receive a report from RKG. RKG is your fiscal peer reviewer, so they did provide a memo to you last week. I believe it was on the 19th. And they concluded with the applicant's fiscal review that even with this proposed change in the reduction in the amount of office space, there's still, the project is still beneficial to the town. It's still, the fiscal benefit is greater than what was originally projected in that 2013 estimates in the original projections.
Are there any board member questions or comments?
None of the questions have been resolved.
Is there anyone else who would like to comment on this? Any public comment? I don't see any. We have a draft motion here. Has everyone had a chance to review that?
So there's a draft motion that was provided in your packet. It essentially outlines all the documents and materials you received as part of this application, including the applicant submissions and your peer review reports, and then summarizes all the findings that you need to make for the special permit and modification to the master development plan, which is related to development area A.
Should we read the entire motion?
Let's ask Dan. If we could ask Mr. Bailey.
Mr. Bailey, do you have an opinion on whether we should recite the full detail?
Do we, I don't know if he heard. Should we?
So
My recommendation is the first thing you do is close the public hearing.
Make a motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
I have a motion to close the public hearing. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The public hearing is closed.
And Brian, if you could repeat that, I didn't get all of it.
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
Or I think the question was whether we should read out loud the entire.
No, no.
Okay.
What you can do is something
Either?
like, move to approve or reject. But move, I mean, if you move to reject, that's easy. But if you're going to move to approve, what I would do is something like, I move pursuant to section 9.7.12.14 of the Westwood zoning bylaw, that the planning board approve the proposed master development plan special permit modification, or special permit for modification of the master development plan in accordance with the written motion that is in front of us, consisting of 3 pages.
Thank you for the suggestion, and I will leave it to a.
so I move pursuant to section 9.7.12.14 of the Master Development Plan Special Permit of the Westwood zoning bylaw, of the planning board votes to approve the special permit in accordance with the written motion, 3-page motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? So the special permit application, the modification to the plan is approved. We'll move on to the second item on the agenda, which is the details of what can be built after this, with this modification. So that is University Station, Station Drive, Project Development Review, Public Meeting, proposal for 100,000 square foot 4-story office building and approximately 513 parking spaces.
Where's the view? How do I change the view? I forget how to change it.
And I think if, again, if you could focus on any of the changes and updates from the last meeting, I think that would help us. And then we will, I think, kind of focus in on a couple of items that, if there's anything that's, you believe needs clarification, draw our attention to that first.
So again, Paul Sincotta with New England Development. I think the board is aware that Beta has provided a very thorough review. We're on about at least the second, if not third, iteration of that included meetings in coordination, both with Merrick and his team for site civil aspect, and then Mike Sinesi on architecture. There's a there's a slide that we prepared, which I think will allow us to very quickly sort of summarize the design aspects that have fallen out of the review comments, both from the board at the initial April 2nd hearing, as well as those that came out of Beta's review. I'm going to put them into a handful of categories. So there are a number of them that relate to pedestrian, crosswalk, sidewalk type issues. There are a couple that relate to the fire department, fire access aspects. And then probably the last main category, landscaping related items. So on the crosswalk related items, so there were comments received both by the board, the pedestrian bike and safety committee, Beta, the police department, relating to the configuration of the crosswalks where the access drive meets Station Drive and where the access drive meets Harvard Street. The crosswalks have been placed in the positions that were requested here on the west side, here on the north side. Through the parking lot, the alignment of this sidewalk, this main sidewalk that follows through the end cap islands was also adjusted in alignment to make it a little bit more of a smooth alignment configuration. A parking space was given up to increase the landscape area of this particular end cap island and to correct the alignment, make it a little bit more pedestrian friendly. Other sidewalk sidewalk and pedestrian related improvements. We spent some time talking about where the limits of the stamped asphalt concrete walks will be. So this walkway that crosses the parking trays in a number of locations will be color stamped asphalt, as will the crosswalks down at the southern end of the site. Somewhat also related to sidewalks, we talked about the existing sidewalk on Harvard Street on the office development side of Harvard Street. It's a dead-ended segment today. It comes up from in front of Lifetime Fitness and dead ends right around here. The proposal, there were two ideas talked about in the last meeting. One was to extend it from the dead end location up to the south entrance drive. There are a lot of concerns with the steep grade of existing Harvard Street there, and given that sidewalk on the sharp curve would have potential people in wheelchairs coming off of the curve into the road as opposed into the shoulder on the side, we've opted to just simply remove the sidewalk back down to where there's already a crosswalk in Harvard Street today that puts you on the sidewalk that's on the Eversource side of the road all the way up to the Eversource Drive intersection. Fire department related comments. The original application showed a dead end fire lane access behind citizens. In some recent meetings with the fire department, we've agreed to extend that out to the south parking lot. That was accomplished by moving the transformer to this side of the loading bay and sliding the dumpster enclosure to the south a bit. So a parking space was sacrificed here to relocate the dumpster, and the transformer is provided next to the loading bay where there's still adequate room to screen it from that patio area that is on the southeast corner of the building. The other change that came out of the fire department's review, there's a building connection anticipated in this location on the building. So similar to what was done with the Makita office building down on the lower campus, a space has been striped out to be sure that they have access to that building connection, and a radius to turn into the fire access drive from the parking lot was made larger at the expense of a parking space. The parking space count, which I think is buried under this label here, is now at about 507. The initial application was 513, I think, Nate. The landscape improvements, the last meeting we talked about trying to incorporate some landscaping into the south lot. We've elected to take 4 spaces out and create a large landscape island in the middle of the lot, and I think that the board has wanted to consider taking those 4 spaces and creating landscape islands in 2 different locations. So sacrifice the same number of spaces, but do it in 2 smaller islands. Our preference, because we think that it is a more meaningful landscape area, and it certainly gives more growing real estate for the landscape material, is to combine them all into one location in a centrally located place. We also think that because there is landscaping on the edges, it's more impactful to have that 4 spaces in the middle of the parking field rather than have a couple of spaces that are taken for edge landscaping, you know, where you might lose a space here and lose a space there. I think the last one of the last couple of things I wanted to point out, there was concern about segregating traffic at the front drop-off area, and so the resolve to that, meaning being certain that through traffic stays on the access drive and is not tempted to cut through the front drop-off area where the accessible spaces are up against the front of the building. So a couple of different things have taken place here. We've extended the nose of this island so that it comes all the way out to the travel edge lane of the main access drive. There's added landscaping in there. There's a sign in the end cap island before you get to this location that is an advance warning sign that the main access stays to the left and the drop-off zone goes to the right. There's a concrete rumble strip that extends the nose of that divider island in front of the building here. And then there's the heavy white broken dashed edge line treatment that also delineates the side of the access drive here. Last thing that I'll point out in response to a beta question was clearly delineating what the limit of work will be for the south parcel, which is the Citizens Office building, versus the future development of the north parcel. And so there's a work limit line that's drawn to not include these parking spaces. So these spaces will be constructed, this travel aisle will be constructed, but these parking spaces will not be constructed, and they will be part of the site plan for the eventuality of that second office building. I think that really sort of wraps up. I'll show you the landscape plan. Actually, one important thing on the landscape plan, one of the comments in response to the comments for having some plantings along the eastern boundary of the main access drive, Shadley's. We've picked out areas that, one, we were trying not to hinder views to the front of the building. I think it's a pretty, it's an impressive view from down below. I think you've seen in the packages the perspective that shows the prominence of the building. We have this landscape island here, so we didn't propose any here. We proposed them to the right and the left of the building. And the edge treatment landscaping has been filled out on the landscape plan in response to some of the other comments that come out of the review.
Could you go over the Harvard Street sidewalk situation again? I'm a little confused at what we're going to end up with.
So today, and unfortunately, part of it extends off of the picture, but in front of Lifetime Fitness, there's a sidewalk on both sides of Harvard Street that extend up to approximately this location. The sidewalk on, I'll call it the office side of Harvard Street, dead ends right about where that bold line is. The sidewalk on the Eversource side of the driveway has been in existence for as long as Eversource has been, and that sidewalk extends all the way up to this intersection. There's a crosswalk goes over here, and then the sidewalk extends all the way along Station Drive down to 101 Station Drive. It also takes you up to the Eversource building. So this segment of sidewalk is connected to the sidewalk on the other side of the street, just off of the picture by way of a crosswalk. And at one time, it was envisioned that this sidewalk might possibly extend further up Harvard Street. There are two options here. One is, as has been suggested in some of the comments, take that dead end and bring it all the way up to our entrance drive. The reason why we're opposed to that is because there are 10+% grades in this segment of Harvard Street. I'm sure you know it's very, very steep. So they well exceed what the accessibility guidelines are, albeit some people look at the Architectural Access Board guidelines and suggest that because the road has an existing it has an existing profile of 10%, and the sidewalk shouldn't exceed 5%, it's that existing sort of grandfathered kind of status that would make it okay to put a sidewalk next to that existing road. In our view, we feel as though because there's an opportunity to cross down here, there's no need to have a sidewalk on this side. And for us, the scarier part about the sidewalk being on the inside of the curve is that folks that are in wheelchairs that are coming down a very steep grade this way, if they're not able to negotiate the grade, then they're more apt to end up in the traveled way than they are if they're coming down the same grade on the outside of the curve. And so our proposal is to just simply remove that dead end piece of sidewalk. It's removing about 150 feet of sidewalk back to where there's a crosswalk across Harvard Street.
So we're gonna take the crosswalk across Harvard Street, and then we're gonna have a sidewalk that connects to the south side of the parking lot?
Correct. So this existing sidewalk brings you all the way up. It continues on down to 101 Station Drive, continues on to the Eversource building, and that's the crosswalk that brings you into the office site. There's a sidewalk that comes down the entrance drive, and then it connects you with this sidewalk system that runs the entire length of the access drive. The other thing that to note is, because of right-of-way limitations, Harvard Street does not have a sidewalk on both sides for its continuous length. You may be able to visualize when you come in off of University Ave, the right-of-way on the left-hand side, which is that small office building, which is the opposite side from the rear of the old Sports Authority and Petco spaces, there's no sidewalk in that initial segment. The sidewalk doesn't begin until you get to the Lifetime Fitness properties. And that was driven by the amount of right-of-way that was available in that portion of Harvard Street.
So if you're coming up Harvard Street from the south side of the property, past Lifetime, you're coming up the hill, you're gonna come to a crosswalk.
Which is approximately at this
You're
location,
gonna cross to the north side of Harvard Street,
and then walk on this side.
and then it's gonna continue up the street that side.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So there's I mean, it's sort of obvious, but there's a 10% grade on the existing sidewalk too, so it's the same condition, it's just,
Right. And so the distinction that we're sort of making for ourselves is that it really goes back to the sidewalk being on the inside of a curve rather than on the outside of a curve. And somebody that's in a wheelchair, so the grades are obviously regulated for people that are traveling in wheelchairs, because steep grades would be harder to manage the speed. And again, it truly is more about what we think is a safer alternative, as opposed to, building a few hundred feet of sidewalk. This is not being driven by the cost of the sidewalk from here to there. It's truly not a lot of sidewalk. It's really that the sense is that it's better to have a steep sidewalk on the outside of the curve rather than on the inside of the curve. And in this particular instance, we don't see that the pedestrian volume is heavy enough that, you know, those users crossing Harvard Street are going to be that terribly inconvenienced by it. So, you know, our sense is that it's the better solution given how steep Harvard Street is.
Abby, is this item the only, most significant thing on which the conditions and we disagree? Say it's worthwhile to get other board members, if anybody
I
has
would
an
think so,
opinion.
yep. That was,
So we need to decide whether we want to require the sidewalk or
Yeah.
not.
yep, require extending the sidewalk up
extending
that
it
side
up.
of Harvard Street.
Anyone else have thoughts on that?
No, each board member just has to decide, should these people, I think any of the pedestrians cross twice or go on the inside with a 10% grade of that second turn on Harvard. That's really what it comes down to. Cross twice on the road. If you're coming up the road from University Ave or you want to go down to University Ave, you'll need to cross the street twice, as the applicant proposes, or take the inside turn at a 10% grade. Is that right, Paul, essentially?
Yes.
Can I get a quick poll of board members then? Like, I mean, my thoughts are, if you're coming from Eversource, you're already on the other side of the street. If you're in this parking lot, you go down to what they've proposed. I don't think it's necessarily unsafe, because I think people can figure out 10% is probably not a great idea to go down in a wheelchair, but I don't see a lot of use, and I think there's other places in town where sidewalks are more critical, so I would be okay with what's here.
Will there be a safety signal, a crossing signal at the one at the new entrance?
Crosswalk.
At this location?
Yes.
No, there's no signals proposed on Harvard Street for the pedestrian crossing.
Will it be raised? How will it be visible from someone coming down from Eversource?
Well, fortunately, the location and the placement of the access drive into the upper campus was very much driven by the fact that it's on that tangent, so there's good sight distance from both approaches, which is the reason why we don't think it's necessary to make any raised conditions, traffic signals or otherwise.
And what about, instead of raised, like just the visibility of it? What is the intent there?
So clarify, Nate,
So painted
are we
lines
proposing,
or-
is it straight paint or is it,
Okay. Got it. That was my
yep,
first question.
oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood, right. So the advanced crossing sign would be placed in advance from both directions?
And then who's responsible for the restriping? Is that Public Works?
In Harvard Street, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
So there would be two connected with the upper campus, that one and that one.
Paul, would it be possible if you did extend that sidewalk up, that you were able to put some type of a barrier, guardrail or something like that, between the sidewalk and the road at that dangerous turn, as I think you called it, or the 10% grade turn? So if someone's in a wheelchair and can't negotiate that turn, there is a way?
I think as a practical matter, it needs to be a double-sided rail. The back side of a guardrail, installed in a normal configuration, isn't anything that you really want to have a run-in with.
I understand that. So,
And-
but instead of just hitting the open backside, you could put a rail on the other side, so you'd have the wooden posts encased with guardrail on both sides. That would be the only solution to that, right?
Right. And it would have to be close to the curb, right, obviously, and
Right.
then the sidewalk would be behind the rail.
But it really wouldn't be a guardrail for car traffic because it is the inside corner. It would be a guardrail for the pedestrian or the person in a wheelchair making that
So
turn.
it's an interesting question as to whether or not, I look to Merrick and Nate as to whether or not a rail up against the curb, if it would,
Yeah, I mean, I
if it would have to satisfy a vehicle.
yeah, I think if you think of it in terms of a short wall or something like that, it would just be something that wasn't obstructed to visibility, so it would be fairly low, but it would be high enough to do what you're thinking of doing, in terms of just adding protected element.
For the pedestrian, you're saying?
It would be for an individual losing control, who's in a wheelchair. or
Right.
something like that.
The only reason I'm pursuing this line of thought is anytime we put in sidewalks, we don't like crossing streets. It's just, it's counterintuitive to the issue, of the idea of a crosswalk. So I'm just exploring all the thoughts of how can we extend that sidewalk up. Mr. Atkins identified that the grade is the same on either side of the road, correct? 10%? So the sidewalk on the other side, you'd meet with the same grade for someone in a wheelchair.
If you want to get into math, the route on the outside of the curve is slightly longer than the route on the inside, so I think if you did the math, you'd find that it's slightly steeper on the inside.
Okay.
But maybe it's not material enough.
It's come up recently in some sidewalk discussions around town about the issue of now we have to cross the street, now we have to cross back.
Yep.
So it's a bit of a sensitive topic, so that's why I'm exploring that.
Understood.
So I think what are you thinking?
Well, my thought is, if we put a sidewalk there, that kind of denotes to people that it's safe. And if we're in a position where it might not be safe for someone in a wheelchair to go down that sidewalk, I don't think that sidewalk should be there.
That's my feeling also, Mike.
All right, why don't we do so on this issue, why don't we just have an informal vote of, the question is whether we want to require the sidewalk potentially with, well, do we want to require the sidewalk on the Harvard Street side or not? Yes or no? So I'd say those who would say, yes, let's require the sidewalk, raise your hand. And those who would agree with this proposal,
I agree.
agree? Okay. What other, Abby, are there other things that we need to resolve, you think, from the conditions that have, most of them, again, as you said, Beta had gone through, and I read
Right.
it back and forth and resolved most of the conditions, or most of the questions.
There was a few comments from Beta, and one of the suggestions that Paul had touched on earlier about that landscape island in the middle of that southern lot, whether you want it to be one larger island in the middle of the lot or two smaller islands.
So the drawing that showed the landscaping and all, was that showing with the smaller islands? Because I thought
Smaller.
you were wanting, your proposal was not to have those 4 clumps of 2 trees, but
We-
to have one big clump.
We showed it both ways just for demonstration purposes. And one thing to point out, because I think that part of the April 2nd discussion was that maybe parking spaces be taken on the extreme boundaries of the lot, so a space on either on both the right and the left side up against the parking lot extents, could be taken for landscape islands. We've chosen to not put landscape islands along that edge or that edge. So when we propose 2 islands versus 1 island, we're still confining them to the middle of the lot where we think they're most impactful.
So this shows 4, right?
It shows 4 spaces taken. The other one shows 4 spaces. This is 2 and 2. And the other plan is all 4 in a central location.
So thoughts, I'm agreeing that a larger central space, probably more likely to thrive, breaks things up better than a bunch of small clumps.
I agree with that.
I think we have agreement on that.
Okay.
Are there additional, do we need to hear from anyone else from our peer beta?
I'm Merrick Turner, Beta Group, the peer reviewer for the project. I don't think there's too much to go through. I think you've just gone through the significant changes and the significant issues, and I think the applicant has done a good job in terms of responding to the comments that we had. In the letter you have in front of you, which is the April 18th letter from us, you'll see most of the comments, other than what's been discussed tonight, is essentially resolved. A couple of other quick items. A lighting plan. We did receive a lighting plan. That review has been done. Some comments have come back. I think that lighting plan is substantially complete. Any issues that we have are minor and certainly could be resolved in a post-decision situation in terms of just refining the lighting plan just to bring it completely into line with the criteria for the development area. So that was one item. And then the last item that I had was just along this edge. Let's use this. Oh yeah, it's there. Just along this edge here, we talked about one option, which was a raised crosswalk versus the textured pavement striping. On balance, I think we agree with what the applicant has shown for the reasons you just discussed at this island here, that with a walk to one side, you can get a fairly good size landscaped area here to get some good plantings and so forth. And it's a challenging site in terms of the subgrade. There's probably going to be quite a bit of ledge encountered as a result of the site. If the board wanted to pursue a raised crosswalk, it would have to be positioned more centrally in these islands. And as a result of that, you're going to break up that sort of planting area a little bit, which will make it a little more challenging to plant and thrive and so forth. So on balance, we agree with what they've shown. There'll be a good demarcation with the epoxy crosswalks, and all of these aisles will be under stop control as well. So we don't see there being a safety issue either. And I think that was it. The landscaping around the site, they certainly added quite a bit of landscaping in the areas we pointed out in this area here, and up in here, where the original intention was to retain existing landscaping, but that really is sort of in poor condition or non-existent today. So that was a good addition. And then through this area here, on the easterly side of the driveway, they're showing pockets of additional landscaping as well, which we were looking for. So all in all, I think they've been very responsive to the comments we've had.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to comment on this?
Actually, sorry. Wow, first time I picked that up. Merrick, Mr. Sincata indicated that he thought the larger planting area would give it a better chance to thrive, the plants that is. I kind of like the idea of breaking it up and what your suggestion was in your memo. I can't remember if it was you or Phil, but would you agree that it's a significant advantage for the plantings to thrive given the larger island that they're proposing?
I think in this kind of subgrade, I think anything larger is probably better, but is it a huge benefit? I don't know that I'd entirely agree with that. You're still talking about an area, if it was two areas, that would be about 8 feet wide by 40 feet, 35 to 40 feet. So it's still a fairly substantial area. You know, you could probably over-excavate a little bit around that just to help with that. Not a lot because you're sort of on a parking surface. But is it better? Perhaps it's better. Is it markedly better? I don't think it's hugely better in terms of one large area versus two small. They're still a decent size. Anytime we get below 6 feet in terms of width, we'd have more concern, but we're still well over that with dividing it up.
Are there any other spots in this parking area that would have similar-sized islands?
I would imagine these islands are fairly similar, these end caps here, maybe these as well. The islands that are available in general, certainly along this edge, are pretty generous. So I think this is a fairly strong landscaped edge in here. But yeah, so through here, these end caps here, I'd say were similar to what you would generate by breaking this 4 space into 2 groups of 2.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there any other board members with questions or comments? Is there anyone in the audience who wanted to comment on this?
So Abby, it looks like from the conditions, there are 2 that I noted were required modification, that 1A.
Right, so you want to remove 1A?
So that would be so that would be a removal if we go with the doubling.
Yep,
Yeah.
okay. And then not to require G?
Yeah, so
The
G
sidewalk
is
extension.
out. And then are plantings required to be replaced in perpetuity based on the landscape plan if they, I know that this is going to be a challenging surface to grow on.
Yes, we do have that in our zoning bylaw, that landscaping, if it's approved on the plan, has to be replaced in kind. We could add some language there if you like. We could add that also to a condition. We do have the suggested condition number 2, that they come back for a final landscape plan to you. This is for more specifics on the plantings at the top of the slope between the curb and the parking lot.
So could you repeat that, Abby? Did that require a change? Or is that where you would add the?
We could add it to,
And is this the replanting in kind? Is that what you're?
oh,
referring to?
actually, no, I think it would be, oh, no, we do actually have that in condition 7.
Okay, great.
We have that, if any, when the plantings have to be installed prior to the issuance of certificate of occupancy. Let me just finish reading that. Okay, we could add to the end of that, any plantings
7.
that do not survive, add to the end of 7, shall be replaced in kind.
Anything else?
Okay, I think we could have a motion to.
So it's a motion to approve this.
I think
special
it's to
permit.
grant the PDR approval, basically, and then motion to grant the project development review approval, including the conditions of approval that we've discussed that are in this.
So should we go over the conditions first, or make a motion to approve the ADR? Abby,
So Abby, you want to
the
just,
sequence of,
we have findings, procedural findings, project findings, a decision, conditions of approval.
I think you could make a motion to approve the draft findings and conditions as prepared by staff in the draft dated April 23rd, reviewed here tonight, and the 12 conditions further modified this evening.
I think it's worth reading them out.
Okay.
All right, let's,
So I make a motion to approve the draft findings and conditions. The approval of the above-mentioned application is subject to the following conditions. Number 1, what do I do this for the room? The proponent shall submit a final revised plan set, including civil site plans and architectural design plans, revised through the close of the public hearing on April 23rd, 2019, in PDF format, incorporating any modifications made by any conditions of this approval. Said plan set shall be submitted to the town planner for the planning board's file. Plans shall be further revised as follows. So the first one is replacement. Replace the flush curb at the southerly entrance to the parking lot with a raised curb in the same location.
We took that out.
Is that the removal, Abby?
Yes, you took out
See, we took
So
out
B is
A.
out too.
A.
We
You took out A.
Okay,
Okay.
good, thank you, sir.
So the next one, and so I'll repeat. Replace the flush curb at the southerly entrance to the parking lot with a raised curb in the same location. Enlarge and widen the landscape island in the northerly lot closest to the northerly entrance by removing one parking space to improve the sidewalk alignment and planting. Extend curbing to enlarge the planting area at the end of the island of the first crossing aisle of the northerly lot. Detail the finished condition of the walls along the Station Drive adjacent to the future development site at the northwesterly corner of Development Area A for consistency review and approval by the town planner. And expand the landscape island to the north of the 8 accessible parking spaces on the east side of the building with curbing and appropriate landscaping. Number 2, the proponent shall submit to the planning board a final landscape plan showing tree plantings in the area along the easterly side of the access drive between the slope and the curb, specifying the species, number, and location of trees for final review and approval by the planning board prior to the issuance of a building permit. 3, the patio area shall be constructed substantially as shown on planting plan 2, sheet L-102, revised April 9th, 2019. Any proposed minor revision shall be submitted to the town planner for review and approval. More substantial revisions related to the use of the space, layout, and screening shall require further approval by planning board in the form of a modification of the decision. 4, the proponent shall work cooperatively with the Neponset Valley Transportation Management Association, which offers shuttle bus services to employees and clients to evaluate the feasibility of midday shuttle bus service between the office building, the core retail areas and restaurants along the University Ave. Each office user shall be a dues-paying member of the TMA of the Transportation Management Association or its successor, and shall provide information about the Transportation Management Association service to all new employees in the time of hire and all existing employees on an annual basis. 5, the proponent shall submit to the town planner and Beta Group a final revised lighting plan demonstrating compliance with the zoning bylaws for consistency review and approval by the town planner. The proponent, number 6, the proponent shall submit a final signage plan in conformance with the requirements of section 9.7.10 to the planning board for review and approval prior to application for a building permit for such signage. The building shall have signage that prominently displays the building address for ease of emergency response. 7, all landscapes shall be installed prior to issuance of a certificate of occupancy, except that if the building is otherwise ready for occupancy after mid-November and prior to mid-April, the proponent may be issued a conditional certificate of occupancy upon the establishment of adequate surety to cover the cost of materials and installation of plantings in the next available growing season. Plantings that do not survive shall be replaced in kind. Number 8, the proponent shall submit a final operations and maintenance plan for review and approval by the Beta Group, the fire chief, and the town planner. The said plan shall be submitted at least 30 days prior to the request of a certificate of occupancy. The operations and maintenance plan shall incorporate the comments from Beta Group on April 18, 2019. 9, a final as-built plan shall be submitted in PDF and AutoCAD format to the town planner and Public Works Department prior to issuance of a certificate of occupancy. The as-built plan shall show all structures, parking spaces, sidewalks, landscaping, pavement markings, Site features and utilities. 10, the proponent shall use a waste hauler licensed by the Westwood Board of Health to dispose of all construction debris and trash disposal. 11, if necessary during construction, the proponent shall provide a portable toilet from a company licensed by the Westwood Board of Health. And 12, the town planner shall review and approve the site for compliance with the planning board's approval prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy.
Second?
There is a motion and a second. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor? of
Aye.
appro-
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? So that is approved. Is this is not a public hearing, it's, right, it's a,
Yep,
review.
it's not a
Yep.
public hearing. Yep.
So not, just, no,
Get me in trouble, John.
we just want to make sure we always, we don't forget to
Absolutely.
close or continue hearings.
Can we
Okay, I
look at the
believe
A&R?
that that's, concludes that. Congratulations. Nope.
Just a
Do
vote?
it later. Rather do it later?
We can do it later.
Then, Abby, what else?
No, that's next. We'll do the A&R later on the agenda.
Okay, so, you mean item 5, the A&R plan for University Station? Why don't,
Unless he was asking if we want to take the A&R out of order.
right, why don't we just do that, because all we need to do is review it for whether approval is or is not required, and then it's not a subdivision, et cetera. So we're going to take item 5 on the agenda out of order. After we take item 5, we'll continue with item 3, which was the Green Company's 45 Clappertree Street.
The A&R that corresponds with the project development review plan layout is a 2-lot subdivision of the 11.5 acres of the upper campus. So the southern lot is the larger of the two, and the northern lot, that's about 2.5 acres, and the southern lot's about 8.5 or 9 or so. And the dividing line corresponds with the line that you see on the site plans that are shown as part of the PDR application set. It's, it's got tons of frontage and lots of area. The criteria for this overlay district is 50 feet of frontage, and I think it's 15,000 square feet. Fairly straightforward, very conforming.
Are there any questions about the, does anyone have any questions, any public questions about that?
No issues.
Then I think we can have a motion to find that it is, this is an A&R, this is an approval not required plan, meets the requirements of an approval not required plan, so we can therefore endorse it.
So I make a motion that an A&R is not, an A&R is appropriate for the development area A map 33 lot 013.
Yes. Yep.
Okay?
Second?
Motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the approval is not approved but endorsed, and so we will sign that after the meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Okay, moving on to the next item on the agenda is 45 Clappertree Street, the Green Company continued public hearing. This is an open space residential development special permit and limited environmental impact design review for LifeWorks Group Home on Lot 1. It's a proposal to construct access road for 40 age-restricted residential dwellings, condominiums, open space area, including preservation of the existing field and parking, meeting facility, stormwater management, landscaping, and associated site work. I believe the applicant from the Green Company would like to present first. And again, as we have had several hearings, if you want to highlight any changes or modifications.
Hi, I'm Dan Green, president of the Green Company, and I have a very short presentation tonight. All the changes that were requested from the last hearing have been made, and they've been reviewed by the peer reviewer at Beta. In addition, we've submitted bids to substantiate our sidewalk costs and have increased our sidewalk fund contribution to $70,000. We've been in discussions with the town regarding the affordable housing restrictions, as well as the soccer field and the parking restrictions, and we feel comfortable where we are. And at this point, we feel you have enough information to vote on our proposed open space residential development, and I'm happy to take any questions.
All right, thank you. Unless, Abby, do we have any staff comments, or can we just highlight the issues and have a discussion? So the sidewalk fund was the first issue.
Oh, yeah. Hold on. I just have a draft update of conditions. Yeah, hold on just a minute.
Okay, so we have some materials here. We have draft conditions of approval. And I think as you highlighted, the two issues that I see here for discussion are whether the sidewalk fund, are we good with that? And two, the details surrounding the affordable housing arrangements, including the deed restriction of the property. So on the sidewalk fund issue, is there discussion of that? Or questions about that?
I find it acceptable.
Do we have anything from DPW?
Yes, we had Phil did review this as our peer reviewer and agreed that the applicant's offer of the $70,000 is adequate, more than enough than the estimated cost that Phil reviewed. This is for in lieu of providing the sidewalk on one length of the road and then also accounting for that extra foot for their waiver from 4 to 5 feet on one side, so $70,000.
So that represents the town costs?
How much it's, yes, above what it would cost the town to construct the sidewalk.
Okay.
So you could then, if you approve that, then there is a specific condition in your draft decision that the funds would go to new or replacement sidewalks at other locations into the town's sidewalk fund.
Okay, I'm sensing that we believe that is adequate, that accomplishes the goal of the 70,000. We thank you for adjusting that based on the 80% idea.
Thank you. Do you take a check?
No, we don't.
I will.
Well,
See, so I think the second issue is whether the conditions that we have, whether we have the affordable housing issue covered. So I know we had some public concerns about that, and I would like to kind of, if anyone from that would like to speak to their concerns, I think kind of taking that a little bit out of order here, but I'd like to understand more specifically their concerns so that we can see if there's a way to, whether our conditions can meet those concerns or meeting those concerns. So I mean, we had a couple of letters from people, but is there anyone in the audience who'd like to address that, or should we read the letter, or what should we do?
well, the applicant's proposal, oh, is it sounding, oh, there's sounding, okay.
Yeah, I'd kind of like to just, at the last hearing, I know that if you could identify. At the last hearing, you raised a question about this, and I kind of wish I'd asked more specifically, but we read the letter, and I wanted to kind of hear firsthand what your concerns were. So if you could identify and yourself, as always, and then.
Thank you. So Marjorie E. Ramo Young, 48 Clapboard Tree Street, across from the project. And as I expressed at the last hearing, I'm in favor of the project, and I'm also in favor of LifeWorks, utilizing Lot 1. My concern was what would happen if LifeWorks were to no longer be utilizing Lot 1. What could then transpire on the property? And I don't think that we had real control mechanisms in place at that time, or had vetted them, and I'm wondering if at this point maybe we have.
So I think that, so my understanding of it would be that there's underlying zoning that limits what can be done on the property now. The primary goal of if the deed restriction was to prevent like, for example, someone might, a couple of years in, decide they'd rather sell it and remove the affordability restriction, and they could sell it for a lot more money as a private home or something. What I'm hearing is that there are other concerns that an unpredictable use could happen. But how are you looking for, so I'm thinking that the underlying zoning prevents things like, no one could build an apartment complex on it because it's single residence A. No one could introduce a use that's not allowed in SRA as the underlying zoning. And the deed restriction limits further to say that the use has to be an affordable use. I'm still not, is there a use that we're particularly concerned about? Or Nora, do you have something you want to?
So we discussed this further with the applicant, and we came up with a condition that's in the draft before you. It's spelled out in the first draft condition of approval. And what this does is it changes the application slightly from what you've reviewed before. The original proposal was for the Green Company to sell Lot 1, or for a nominal amount, to LifeWorks, and for LifeWorks to open a group home at that location, and for there to be a deed restriction that allowed for a right of first refusal for the town to purchase the property if it didn't continue in that use. We were concerned that that didn't provide the perpetuity that we were looking for that the bylaw requires. So we discussed this with the Green representatives, their attorneys, and with the town council, and we're recommending a change that's spelled out in condition 1. Under this proposal, the town would actually receive Lot 1 from the Green Company. The town would then lease it to LifeWorks, a 99-year renewable lease for a nominal amount, and as long as LifeWorks remained in business operating a group home, everything continued as normal. If LifeWorks was no longer able to operate a group home, they could, the town could lease it to another entity who could operate a group home that's eligible, approved under DDS, and eligible for listing on the SHI, on the subsidized housing inventory. And if that didn't happen, the town would have the property and could either convert the property to an affordable unit or could sell the property and use the funds that they acquired in that sale to create new units. In addition, the Green Company will contribute an amount to the town subsidized housing, town's affordable housing trust fund upon the sale of each unit. And what this draft calls for is for that amount to be $10,000 per unit. That would create a fund that would be additional affordable housing dollars that could be spent to make sure that we can recreate as many units as we would otherwise lose. Whether it ends up being 4 units or 5 units in the group home, we would have funds in place to always create those if that ever became a concern. We don't expect that to be a concern. We expect LifeWorks to continue in business operating a group home at this location, but by having the town be the property owner, I think we remove any neighbors' concerns about a different user using it that wouldn't be approved. Under this proposal, since the town is the property owner, the town leases to LifeWorks. If that has to change at some point and the town has to lease to a different entity, that would go before town meeting for consideration. So everyone would have a say at that time. So the proposal that is here now is in condition 1, and I think it spells it out to satisfaction of everyone I've discussed this with. We've also spoken to Dan Burke from LifeWorks, and he believes this is workable on his end.
Thank you.
So, given that proposal, my concerns are calmed.
Thank you. Are there other questions?
Are there any negative financial impacts to the town being the owner of the property instead of LifeWorks? Nothing changes? I mean, or it's so de minimis that it doesn't matter?
So the town is the owner. We will hold the fee in the property, but we will be leasing it for a 99-year lease, which is equivalent from a financing perspective to LifeWorks owning the property.
Okay.
Is there any, like, a property tax implication, or would that,
Well, we would set it up so there wasn't, but I believe they're a nonprofit organization that's exempt from taxation.
okay, so yeah, there's no, okay. Okay, we have a lot of conditions here, so so everyone is agreeable with that condition?
Yes.
Yes.
And are there additional items here that that we need to discuss? We could go through. Abby, do you want to?
Go through the waivers first?
Yeah, let's. Motion to approve the requested 20 waivers. We never grant waivers, right? It's like, well, but I thought there were like 4.
Well, a lot of those were the details that refer back to your subdivision rules and regulations related to the depth of pavement or, top course of pavement. So I think we did have Phil review those, and because this road is proposed to remain as a private road, we didn't have any concerns.
So should I just make a motion to approve it with the?
Yeah, I think, where's that? I've seen it on the board before, but do any board members have concerns with any of these waivers? We've discussed them in different
We have.
parts. Okay, why don't we,
So I make a motion to approve the requested 20 waivers.
Second.
a motion and a second to approve the waivers. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so the waivers are approved. We have findings of fact. These are all requirements of the special permit process. So do we want to go through the findings of fact? Or Abby, do you want to walk us through those?
Or you could summarize them.
Summarize them?
You need to summarize the benefits of the project.
Okay,
Well, it sounds like Nora just described the first affordability requirements.
and essentially that was, we had, because of the special permit process, the requirement is that an applicant produce the 15%, meet the 15% on-site or off-site if it equally, I'm going to butcher the wording here, but if it equally meets the needs of the town in terms of affordable housing. And so this whole arrangement here we determined that it does equally meet those needs. That was the first finding, is related to affordability.
Soccer fields.
Soccer field, preserving the playing field and providing 40 off-street parking spaces designed for field use and parking. I think essentially we found there that we granted a waiver because of open space is not typically a soccer field, but it's already there, and this is a great benefit to the community, so that's why we did that. 4-step design process. Applicant submitted material and documentation to the planning board demonstrating the design review process, establishing the layout of open space, housing units, and clusters of streets and residences. Sidewalk fund contribution. The applicant is providing $70,000 contribution to the town's sidewalk fund in lieu of providing the sidewalk on the east side of the new road. And we'll recall that through this discussion, originally there was going to be no sidewalk, there'd be a path. We required that there be at least a sidewalk on one side and compensation for the other side. So that's what has been agreed to. Zoning. The property is currently non-conforming hospital use in single-family residence zone. The proposal for residences is more conforming than the prior use. Condos are better than a mental hospital. Housing options for Westwood's aging population. This application provides 40 new home ownership age-restricted development in Westwood. Additionally, a 5-bedroom group home to serve people with physical, mental, and intellectual disabilities is proposed with this application. Historic preservation. Historic elements of the existing buildings are proposed to be integrated into the meeting house with the OSRD development. Those are our findings of fact.
So I'll make a motion. So I make a motion to approve the findings for the OSRD special permit.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? So we have approved the findings of fact. Conditions of approval. We have a list of 49
5 pages.
conditions of approval. I don't particularly want to read every single one of them out loud. Did we, on the materials that are on the website and all, this is not public until after the meeting, right?
Right, we just didn't have it prepared in time.
So we can summarize. We have the first conditions related to resolves the affordable housing concerns. The second group of conditions is related to the field and parking area. Let's see. Abby, are there other conditions that we should highlight here?
Let's see. Many of them came from Phil's review memo. Maybe just making sure we have all the final documentation, final easements, final legal documents in for review. We've also asked for the final operation and maintenance plan. The condition 8 is related to receiving those sidewalk funds, and that when those should be submitted, they should be submitted, that funds should be submitted prior to the issuance of a building permit. The sidewalk improvements shall include converting existing asphalt sidewalks to concrete sidewalks, accessibility upgrades at existing crosswalks, and repairing damaged concrete or curbing of existing sidewalks. We've asked for a inspection fee so that Public Works engineer can go out for inspections. Condition 10 is related to a performance guarantee similar to a subdivision, so that the applicant would put up a security measure before you for construction of the road, and then prior to the sale of any lots, you would hold either a bond, a tri-party agreement, or a passbook account. That's to make sure the infrastructure work is completed. Then we have some standard conditions requested from the Board of Health for permitting during construction. Let's see.
Was the condition 20, the 2 portable bathrooms near the playing field shall be screened from view. Was there an issue about that, or?
There was a fence shown on the landscape plan, so I just wanted to make sure that was clear, that the applicant did show a stockade fence, I believe, to block the view from the residential properties.
Okay.
There was also a request to add bike racks. The plans did show bike racks at the meeting house, but we're requesting that bike racks also be installed by the field.
Okay. And then we have some conditions about the affordable housing. That's
Right.
all conforms with what's been,
And those are related to the timing of when we want to make sure that the approval of those affordable units are early, prior to occupancy of all the market rate units, so that they're captured in our subsidized housing inventory.
Do we have a condition for the 10,000 per unit to go into the?
Yes, that was condition 1.
Oh.
And also requires within 65 days that the final legal documents be submitted to the town council for review.
Yep, 1B.
okay.
Condition 25 is related to if the group home is only approved for 4 affordable units, then the third one is required within the open space and residential development. And then following that are some conditions related to the legal documents related to the open space and the homeowners association documents.
See, then we have construction conditions, so the hours of standard conditions that we have about the hours of construction, the sidewalk being installed in phases. Okay, are there any questions from anyone, or?
I do. Abby, on condition 1B, is that $10,000 for the 38 units that are sold, or
Yep, the 38 units.
will that be each time they're sold, or the one time?
Yep.
So the intent of, it's Part B of Condition 1. The intent is to establish a fund that would cover the cost of reproducing the 4 units if necessary. So money beyond the value of the land that the town would own. The $10,000 per unit would come once on the initial sale by the Green Company to the original owners. There would be no need for additional payments beyond that. That would create a fund of $380,000 that would contribute towards the recreation of 4 units if needed. Abby noted that condition 25 discusses, well, what happens if the group home is only 4 units, not 5, and then a third unit is, a third age-restricted unit is developed on the site. In that event, the $10,000 would be $7,500 because we would only have a need to reproduce 3 units, not 4. So that's not spelled out in here, but that would be spelled out in the legal documents that the town council would have to approve if you address this.
And this is good, because years ago, other agreements that this board, or I'm not sure if it was this board, but there were linkage fees, which were small amounts. They were things like $5,000. And because and this is the amount of money that's necessary to construct the property, so it is actually, this.
Right. The funds that are considered in this document are intended to be sufficient to create the actual affordable units.
And that goes to the newly created trust fund.
The Affordable Housing Trust
Affordable
Fund,
Housing
right.
Trust.
So upon the sale of each of those 38 market rate units, a $10,000 amount, or if the LifeWorks home is only approved for 4 units, a $7,500 amount on the sale of each unit would be contributed to the town to be placed in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and that would have to happen within 30 days of the sale of each unit.
Did you have a question? Would you like?
I was just wanted some clarification on 22 and 46 as to whether or not they in any way conflict with Clause 1, or whether, as Nora just suggested, or what we were previously discussing, the actual documents will make sure that one takes precedent. So Nora, if you could just speak to that. Thank you.
So 22 discusses how the group home will be treated. It would have to be, the group home property shown as Lot 1 on the project plans shall be used in perpetuity as a 5-bedroom group home supporting people with intellectual, developmental, and/or physical disabilities, and the group home shall be licensed by the Massachusetts Department of Development Services or similar agency of the Commonwealth, and the group home shall satisfy the criteria established by the Department of Housing and Community Development for a group home and for each of its bedrooms to be eligible to be counted as affordable dwelling units on the SHI, Subsidized Housing Inventory. Proof of eligibility for listing on the Subsidized Housing Inventory shall be submitted to the housing agent and town planner prior to sale and occupancy of the age-restricted units. So that condition goes towards making sure that the LifeWorks home is built in a manner that can be approved by both DDS and by the Department of Housing and Community Development, and that will actually result in a listing of the units on the Subsidized Housing Inventory. The legal documents will be written in such a way that that's a requirement as long as LifeWorks or another group home provider operates the site. If we get to a point where the town has to sell the property to create affordable housing units elsewhere, because this is only a single-family home if it's not being used as a group home, then the use of the property reverts to the underlying use in zoning. So Marjorie pointed out condition, was it 46? 46, I would recommend that you actually strike, because 46 says that the only use of the property, Lot 1, shall be permanently restricted to use as an affordable single-family residence. Either strike that condition or say, unless otherwise utilized by the town, yes, yes. So underlying zoning is always a possibility. Use of any property for its underlying zoning as a single-family home is always permitted.
Can we actually, though, specify what the use for the group home is going to be? Can we say only for this type of group?
So I believe that's what 22 does. I think it says,
Can we do that? Can we specify? Is that something we can legally do?
we can, in a special permit, we can do that. So that's a term under which you're willing to approve the special permit, a condition of the use of the group home.
So I like the idea of striking condition 46, because one of my concerns was how we've had properties that, once they're limited to being affordable forever, you can get into a situation where there's no incentive to build anything there, and there's no incentive to maintain the property. And in this case, if that happens, the town owns the property and can sell it to be a single-family residence again. So it avoids the scenario that we have where we have properties in town that are owned by Waha that are single-family homes, they're deed restricted forever, and it's very hard to make them break even.
I think, but rather than striking, if you just refer back to condition 1, I think you accomplish the same thing, because condition 1 allows the town to sell the property.
Okay, so just unless, add to this.
Except as permitted pursuant to condition 1.
Condition 1. Okay.
So did we get that change? Abby?
Yep.
Great.
Are there any additional questions about the conditions?
So I make a motion to approve the 49 conditions.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? So we have approved those conditions. So with that, I believe we have approved the special permit application, all the elements of the special permit application. It's a public hearing, so we need a motion to
A
close.
motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
A motion to close the public hearing. We did have public comment. Is there and there's a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? So the public hearing is closed for that. No other issues related to 45 Clabbertree Street. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Come
you.
up with a good name.
Okay, the
Town
The next item on our agenda is the continuation of our zoning amendments public hearing. This is our proposed zoning amendments that we took to FinCom. FinCom heard us and made their recommendations. Now we will discuss those items and vote our final recommendations. So Abby, do you want to
Sure.
take us through through these items?
So you, previously in February and March, you did have public hearings, and you made a recommendation on your zoning articles. You earlier withdrew a couple, so you have 5 that went forward to town meeting. You previously made a recommendation to the Finance and Warrant Commission. Now you should make your motion on the 5 warrant articles to town meeting. So the first one is related to amending the accessory use table to allow those accessory interior retail uses. That's the change to allow essentially cafeterias in the highway business zone. The second article is the article to change the definition of structure to increase from 6 feet to 7 feet, so that walls and fences can go up to 7 feet without obtaining a permit. The next article, this is the zoning amendment related to accessory uses in residential districts. Now, this is the one you probably want to discuss some more tonight. You had recommended, I think, 4 to 1, or maybe, no, yeah, 4 to 1, recommended to the Finance and Warrant Commission this article to amend related to going, the number of cars and what the trigger is for going to the Zoning Board of Appeals. In March, the Finance and Warrant Commission recommended indefinite postponement. You had previously voted to bring this article to town meeting. You can continue with that motion if you'd like tonight. This is, you had made the change essentially by requiring screening of more than 3 vehicles that are in a driveway that are visible from an abutting property.
Why don't we just go through them in order and vote on them, and then when we get to that one, we may have discussion and vote. I think, so
So the first one had to do with the
cafeterias.
cafeteria.
Is there any discussion on that one? All those, well, I think we need a motion to recommend the town meeting approve Article 18.
I make a motion that the town approve Article 18?
Well, we approved that.
The planning board.
Planning board.
Planning board approved Article 18.
We hope the town approves.
But it's essentially, we're recommending, so it's in the warrant, it'll be moved by the Finance and Warrant Commission, essentially. We're just saying, we recommend the town votes on what we proposed, right? So Article 18, the cafeteria stuff, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? So that we can say by a vote of 5 in favor and 0 opposed, the planning board votes to recommend town meeting approve Article 18. Article 19,
Fence height.
fence height, right? Is there any discussion? I mean, we can just, I think it's, well, we need, I guess, you know, like the motion and second and
I make a motion to
recommend it.
to recommend Article 19.
Second.
A motion and a second, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? So by a vote of 5 in favor and 0 opposed, planning board votes to recommend that town meeting approve Article 19. Article 20 is the residential retirement community changes to incorporate the affordable housing unit thing. Any discussion?
No.
So this is just, is this
This is the building height. Yeah.
building height?
I don't remember, was this one that, did you have concerns about this before? I
And
forget it.
affordability?
This was
And
affordable.
I'll vote the same way as before.
Okay, so I need someone else to make the motion if Brian's not supporting this one.
Okay.
I supported it before.
Or you did, or?
I did.
Okay, I thought you were.
This is Article
So
20.
go ahead and make
I
the.
motion to recommend Article 20.
Okay.
Second.
It's a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? By a vote in favor, 5 and 0 opposed, the planning board votes to recommend that town meeting approve Article 20. Article 21, this is related to the parking and storage of more than 3 vehicles. Discussion.
So,
FinCom recommended indefinite postponement, and I
and that was
probably
a
read those.
supermajority, or is it unanimous?
It was like 10-3 against us, or, yeah, I say that, but
3 voted in support.
3 voted in support.
I understand why they voted the way they did, but I still think this is better than what we have.
It is better.
Just by taking the word area out of it, it makes this much better. I understand why FinCom voted the way they did, but I would be in favor of this new wording compared to what we currently have.
I would too.
I believe it's addressing, at least on some level, what the building inspector is asking us to address.
I disagree, just because of the vague language. I don't believe we're solving any problems, we're just gonna create more.
I think the only way it creates more is if the building inspector chooses to make this more of an issue than it has been in the past. But I believe the threshold for making it an issue is harder in this situation. So I believe it protects the homeowners more so than it does now. Because had been stated, no one knows the actual percentage, but at least 70 or 80% of the homes are current violation or potential violation of the bylaw as it reads right now. And this takes that away because we're taking away the issue of a parking area. Right now, anyone can call with an unscreened area, I believe. Is that right, Nora? Any complaint can be made to the building inspector if someone has an unscreened parking area. And if the language of what we're proposing here is unscreened cars more than 3 in number parked in the garage, in the driveway. So I believe it takes away a lot of the exposure to the homeowner who has a long driveway or a driveway that can accommodate more than 3 cars. So that's why I believe it protects the homeowner more than the current wording does.
Well, even with someone with a short drive, my mother's property would be in violation once a week. Not to say that it's not already, but I just don't think what we're proposing is solving at least that problem.
And I also think that at the hearing, the FinCom was a bit, it wasn't digested well, so
I
it
think-
may fall under the same problems.
I think there are two things that they raised in their official opinion. One was that they didn't see the need, or they didn't understand the problem that was being solved, which I don't know if we didn't communicate that, or, but the second was this idea that it was because we've now defined this, it exposes more people to risk, and yet I'm agreeing that it doesn't, but that didn't, we failed to convince the FinCom of that.
I think also, because you're discussing this, people are now in fear that it's definitely going to happen to them. But as always has been the case, as it is now, as it will continue to be, it is always at the discretion of the building inspector to police this. Just as if you got pulled over for doing 60 and a 55, it's at the discretion of the officer as to whether or not to issue a ticket. So if the building inspector comes on a complaint to a home that cars are being parked in the driveway all summer because college kids have returned, and upon his investigation, he finds out that those cars are going to be gone in September, it's up to his discretion to then tell the complaint neighbor, this will be solved in September. This is not an ongoing issue. Or if he finds that this person is now going to be parking cars for 12 months or 8 months and finds that they are thumbing they're snubbing their nose at the town's bylaws, he can then impose his authority as our policing agent for this. That's the case now. It will forever be the case. He is our policing agent. So we always have to defer to the discretion of that policing agent for this.
So my feeling on this is, I think, I think it's better. I think what we proposed is better than what's currently in place. But I think we run into trouble as we got into this whole thing of trying to control the amount of parking. And earlier when we discussed this, we had talked about just taking that out of it altogether and just saying we're going to limit this to garages. I think in that original idea was something that we don't try to say how many cars a person can park or not. But so I mean, one thought I had was we could take this to town meeting and then amend it. We could offer an amendment to take out the part about the parking, or we could just leave it and come back another time with this. I'm feeling like it's gonna be hard to. We had a compromise solution. We've explained it a couple of times, and people are concerned about it still. So I don't think it's gonna. I think we would be better to just revisit it in another town meeting where we limit this to not try to deal with the parking, or deal with the parking as a separate thing, because the people they're concerned about too many cars, but we don't have a good, the area is a bad solution, and then this 3 or 4 in the garage, outside of the garage, I think it doesn't convince people.
I think we do need to revisit it at another time. The wording's not right. People who don't have garages are gonna feel like, well, if someone gets to have 3 in their garage but 2 out front, then they get to have 5, but we only get to have 2 because you can see them. So there has to be better wording on our part.
I think we need to revisit it another time.
Well, I think that's likely going to have to happen anyway, regardless of what comes up with town. I think it's going to continue to be an issue. I don't know. Joe Doyle, our building inspector, is he's getting calls based on our current bylaw. I don't know to what extent, like the frequency that those calls are coming in. I don't know if we want to be a town to limit. How do we look with regard to cars parked in a driveway? I don't even know, are we a town that, we're not a town that prohibits garage sales. There are towns that prohibit garage sales. We need to think about, what do we want to do? And is the planning board, are we the board to do this? Probably are. So as of right now, we are a town that tries to at least consider the appearance of the cars in the driveway. And the wording is, if you have a driveway that is a parking area. So we are going to have to try to solve this. And another board may come along and have an entirely different opinion. And that's just changing with the times, and that's fine. That's how this process works. But I believe what we have now is better than before. So I'm not in favor of removing it, because I think we are acting on our policing agent's request to better word it. I believe it's not good in terms of being done, but it's better than what we have.
All right, I think, so is there a motion? Will someone make a motion, and then we can vote? 'Cause I'm feeling like we may not get a second on that, but
It's fine. I'll make a motion to approve Article 21. Or is it 22?
21.
21, sorry.
So is there a second to that motion? So I'm not hearing a second. So would someone like to make a motion to recommend to recommend that?
A motion to not recommend
No.
Article 21.
Is there a second to that motion?
I second it.
So I have a motion and a second. This is to not recommend town meeting approve Article 21. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
Any abstentions? So by a vote of 4 in favor and 1 opposed, the planning board votes to recommend that town meeting not approve Article 21. I think we have a couple of articles we have to fix in the next board has to fix, and it's just not going to get fixed on the floor of town meeting very well.
So what is Article 22?
So Article 22, housekeeping amendments.
Yep, those are minor housekeeping amendments. Those are the housekeeping amendments
Okay.
that were approved in November 2017 and then overturned by the AG.
Oh, this was the third of the 3 articles.
Yep, we just put that down the bottom.
So which... Is it possible to pull that up on the screen just so I know what we're...
The whole
Because the numbers
article?
don't correspond with the...
Article 22. Hold on.
And none of these housekeeping things were related to the other 2 articles, right? I mean, these are things like,
Mostly section number changes, where a section number may reference an old section number. I think a listing of the overlay district was just missing from the table summary. And then there was reference to the Ron residential retirement community has changed over time from section 8.4 to section 8.5. So that was referenced in another section of the bylaw. And we had reference to an old section 8.4 that no longer exists.
So it was just nothing material, just cross-references?
Insubstantial changes, minor errors.
Yeah, so I motion to recommend Article 22.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? By a vote of 5 in favor and 0 opposed, the planning board votes to recommend the town meeting approve Article 22. So we have no other issues. We need a vote to close the public hearing on the town meeting zoning articles.
Motion to close the public hearing.
Do you ask for public comment?
Is there any additional public comment on the town meeting articles?
I motion to close the hearing on the warrant articles for town meeting.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The public hearing on the town meeting articles is closed. There are two other the agenda items, or these A&R items, are signing of those. That's just we need to sign them. We can do that.
Yep, you voted on it, so you could sign it later and then if you want.
Okay, so I think we could we'll do that after we do the other business and as we adjourn.
Oh.
So let's bring up the first item was Top Golf. So this is an update, or you can tell us.
Can you go to the podium? I'm sorry.
Oh, you want me at the podium?
Yeah, ask for both microphones. I'm sorry.
Connor's a stickler.
Just for the record, Dan Bailey, interim town council. I'm here, this has to do with the Topgolf facility, which is proposed at 777 Dedham Street in Canton. We've reached a tentative settlement agreement the town has with the developer of that facility. I'll remind the board that what happened was that the Topgolf, which is it's basically a high-end driving range, multiple levels, combination of golf, recreation, and on the website, parties and events, and this will be the first one in New England. The town was concerned, the selectmen initially, and I think some other planning, because the facility is going to have 463 parking spaces, and it's just a few hundred yards from the intersection of Canton Street and University Avenue, which received an awful lot of attention in connection with Westwood Station. That entire intersection was rebuilt. It is now being expanded again with the I-95 slip ramp. The planning board did not receive notice of the special permit application, and under the statute, you're entitled to notice. So there was a procedural defect, so we brought an appeal in the land court, really to give the town the opportunity to sit down with the developer and talk about these traffic issues. Beta came in, did some analysis, ultimately came to the conclusion that the only remaining traffic calming that would really be effective on Canton Street, given all that's been done there, would be some sidewalks, because that would probably help slow things down. And we had some settlement discussions with the developer, and ultimately and Mike and Nora were there as well. What was agreed was that the developer would give the town $250,000 in money to be used for any purposes in connection with traffic, sidewalk, any type of mitigation in that area. So it's that money is to be paid when the building permit is issued. It's pretty much got no strings on it. The other thing the developer agreed to do was that when Topgolf gets to the point where they're going to open, they'll be putting up all sorts of information about how you get there, and they've agreed to do the wayfinding in a way that will discourage the use of Canton Street for people coming southbound on 95 or coming from Hyde Park and that area. Route them down to University Avenue, take a right on University Avenue, past the train station and then down and left on Canton Street. We don't have the final agreement yet. I was actually talking with New England Development, actually did the permitting on this. There was one change that I requested in the latest version. I want, the latest version was just a little too loose for my taste in terms of Topgolf's obligations to do the wayfinding. The way that these things get done, the applicant is a single-purpose entity, so they're a single-purpose LLC, and their only purpose is to get the permits. So the only asset that they have are the permits. So they have a closing, they're gone, and I said, well, that's great, but you're going to be gone after your closing. I'd like someone who's actually going to be there to have this obligation, so that we at least have someone we can call. They've agreed to make that change. But we've got a deadline of April 30th for filing the paperwork with the Lane Court. And so you're not going to have a meeting before that. So what I came here tonight for was to explain this to you and ask if you would authorize the town planner to sign the settlement agreement once it is satisfactory to me.
Thank you. I'm curious if, so it's unrestricted, the money would be, was there any way that it could be designated more specifically to sidewalk and things like that, or?
I mean, I think that's the intent. Yeah.
Will be a sidewalk.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't speak to that. The developer really didn't care about restricting it, but that $250,000 is about what it costs to design sidewalks for Canton Street. So that's the intention, to use it for that.
All right, any questions, or?
You're talking Canton Street down in that area,
Oh, yeah.
not going up the hill towards the East Street Rotary.
Well, the design though, right, because it would be like
Where?
$2 or $3 million to do the whole thing.
All the way up to the East Street Rotary? 250,000?
It's just for design,
design.
just
Oh,
design,
design.
yeah.
We have to
Okay,
pay for
sorry.
sidewalks.
Yeah, no, all right. Sorry, misunderstood that.
So should we vote to authorize,
Yes.
Yeah, we do have a,
Draft motion, yeah.
yeah, we have a motion in here
It's in
somewhere.
the meeting, it's in your meeting summary.
Meeting
on page
summary.
5. We have that, or Dan will have?
Who wants to read it?
I'll read it. All right.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
What are they looking at in terms of the cost to put the sidewalk in? Because that would be our cost, right?
I have no idea what the cost of the sidewalk is.
The design will determine what the cost is, because there's all kinds of factors, moving telephone poles, taking down trees, having slope issues you have to address. There's no way of really knowing what the cost will be. It'll be over $1 million, I think. Pretty much guess at that, but.
Probably closer to two.
yeah, it's a big, so I know that the Complete Streets prioritization list at some point had come up with some rough numbers, and much like the way Gay Street was, it's in that same order of magnitude as Gay Street, it would be millions, well not, it's much more than 250, but the 250 would pay for the study that would then, we wouldn't have to go to town meeting to get that study. Or, right?
In addition, there was one other factor that the developer allowed us to utilize some additional funds that have been appropriated for the intersection taking the document.
Yeah. All right. I make a motion to authorize Abby McCabe, town planner, with the advice of interim town council, to sign a settlement agreement among the Westwood Planning Board, the Westwood Board of Selectmen, 777 Dedham Street LLC, and Topgolf USA, that resolves the appeal of the Topgolf special permit and site plan review on terms substantially similar to those presented here tonight.
I second that.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Dan.
Okay. Update. The next item was an update on Islington Center redevelopment. And I did notice that there's a very good, a very detailed update on the town website that describes as of April 12th, I believe, kind of what conditions were. But Abby, do you want to kind of go over some things, or I could just?
Sure. Or do you want me to summarize? Or do you-
Yeah, like what, if you have
Okay.
some.
Let's see, since March, CVS is progressing. You can see the building going up on your way here. You probably saw that. CVS building permit was issued, I think, in March. They are working towards opening early fall, late summer. We are, town staff, the various departments, we are working on the design plans and working with an architect on the renovation, expansion, and relocation of the Wentworth Hall. That's the Islington Branch Library to be relocated across the street. So we are working, the Recreation Director, Youth and Family Services, and Library Director, also working with our Facilities Department and Technology Department to prepare design plans, and plans are progressing, and we don't anticipate any issues. And so we'll be working out the design, and then there would be construction plans drawn up. We would do the foundation across the street to receive the move, and then the building will be relocated, and that construction will be probably early 2020.
So are there any changes to the layout of the CVS, and like if there were like changes to the parking spaces or the size of the green space, any of that stuff? Are there any changes, and if there were, how would that come to us first, or what?
Yes, there are no changes right now. The plans are progressing. If there were very minor changes, they would come to me for a minor approval, but it would still have to be consistent with your planning board special permit approval. Anything more than that would have to come to you for a modification.
And what, with the library move, what do we know in terms of the feasibility of, was there an engineering study or something? Kind of how do we know that the library can be moved safely?
Our initial view is with the architect, and we don't anticipate any issues, but we would be submitting and having engineered plans prior to moving the building. We have to submit the engineered construction documents.
That wasn't done beforehand?
So the library building, Wentworth Hall, was reviewed, you may recall, back probably 2 years ago. The Islington Center Task Force received a study that was produced by the town's facility director, had hired an engineer to review the property and determine everything that needed to be done and what state it was in, and it was found to be a structurally sound building, should be capable of being moved. It's I know people are making a comparison to the Blue Heart Tavern. Very different situation. To begin with, it's a much newer building than the Blue Heart Tavern. It was constructed in a different manner, and it remains on its original foundation. We have no reason to believe that it won't be lifted up and moved directly across the street. The Blue Heart Tavern was a different matter, where the building was already in very poor condition, so poor that its occupants had to move out before it was moved away. It had substantial water damage. It was moved temporarily, put on blocks, and the hope was that it could be moved again. When there was an attempt made to plan the move, and the mover, the historic building mover, said that it couldn't be done without substantial shoring up of the building. That turned out to require replacement of all the floors and walls, and there was just nothing valuable left in the building, nothing of true historic value. So a decision was made that in that case, it was not worth moving that building. That's different than saying it couldn't be moved. It could have been moved, but moving it would have required replacement of the very fabric that we were trying to save for the historic connection to our town's past. Wentworth Hall is different. Wentworth Hall is being proposed to be moved and significantly renovated. It's not of the same ilk. We're not trying to save that interior wall that some colonial ancestor may have touched. Instead, we're trying to preserve the use of a municipal building that was constructed as a municipal building that was important in our town's history that will be continued in use as a municipal building. So it's a very different situation, newer building, in better condition, moving just straight across the street. And if it requires more shoring up to move it, which we don't expect it will, there's no reason why that can't take place. So the architect is now preparing plans to relocate it, to renovate it, and to put a substantial addition on. Those plans are being reviewed, participated in the design of those plans by the Recreation Director, the Youth and Family Services Director, and the Library Director. We will also have the Town Facilities Director participate in that, as well as the Fire Department, to take a look at everything and make sure that the plans, before they go out to bid, are sufficient to meet everyone's needs in that new community center.
What about the curbside parking that they're going to have?
For CVS?
Yes, I didn't
Yes,
see anything in the bylaws about that.
There was nothing in the bylaw, but that was a part of the original special permit. So if you may recall, CVS had originally wanted a drive-through.
Yeah.
And they were told that they couldn't have a drive-through, but instead they could have 2 spaces that were marked for curbside pickup. There are other facilities, other CVS locations that do just that. I think the one in Medfield does that. I know that I've been to several others where they mark spaces off. Something similar, Not Your Average Joe's has 1 or 2 spaces right in front of the door that are reserved for curbside pickup. Same thing. So they'll just be signed spaces.
And like the street parking and all, and the green space, that's on the plans that.
It's all on the plans, all as you've seen it. Nothing has changed. Nothing is expected to change.
Any other?
There was one email that it was more on the Islington Pizza side. The Christina Martin, I saw an email from her. It had to do with the accessibility to the walkway from the handicap spot.
I don't recall what the email
We can add it to the
was,
next meeting, but if you can, she made one comment with regards to the ability for somebody to have access to the walkway.
Oh.
Obviously, there's a concrete barrier keeping a car from going
across
into the walkway.
across the street, you mean?
On the Islington
other
Pizza
people?
side.
Okay.
So at Islington Pizza, actually. The side
So like
parking.
if you're in a wheelchair in the parking area and you're trying to get into Islington Pizza.
You'd
like
have to
it's-
go down the driveway and then up.
like the ramp is on the side of the.
Yeah, so
building.
we might have to move that to the next meeting, but I think it may just be worth a site visit. If you just drive by, you'll see the issue.
Okay. I know I did review the plans prior to occupancy
Yeah.
for compliance with that special permit at that time. That was at 2016.
Yeah, and it's been in use for a while. It was just a comment that we got in an email, so.
Yeah, I
Is
think
this the
also-
on-street handicap space, or is it an
No, it's
off-street
in
one?
the side lot. Yeah, so just if you drive by and we can just talk about it later.
I think it's also the issue of the access.
It
to
stops the
garage.
car from going forward, so there's a function of the concrete, but maybe there's
Okay. The curb stop
something that
maybe?
can be modified,
Okay, I'll take a
if
look.
any.
I think we also, probably a year and a half ago, we talked about the entrance to the parking garage underground and having a gate and whatnot, and that we were going to review that and see if there were issues
Once it
about
got
that.
occupied.
I don't know that there.
So I think the plan there was that it was going to not have a gate or any means of control unless it was found to be a problem, so the board can review it. I would say that's probably something you want to do in the summertime when there are more people walking around.
Yes, I think we can
Okay.
remember to bring that up in
Okay.
the summer.
Yeah.
Okay. Are there any public comments or questions? Ms. Fusco?
Hi, Fran Fusco, 20 Pine Lane. I had a question as far as the curbside delivery. Where is that curbside? On Washington Street?
No, it's in the parking lot.
No, it's 2 parking spaces within the CVS lot. So probably the 2 spaces that are, there's handicap spaces, and there'll probably be spaces right next to the handicap spaces that are reserved for curbside pickup. There's out of 40 spaces.
Okay. I was just concerned that it would be at the back of the building with a window, which would kind of lead you to believe it would be a drive-through as well, so, great. Thank you.
Thank you for the update.
Thanks. I think there's another comment.
14 Loring Street. I was just wondering if we had a picture of that rendering that was mailed out by the developer, just showing the green space, the CVS, the on-street parking, and how it all is going to fit in that small area, because I don't see how it's possible unless we're taking a travel lane away, and I don't know. I've been coming to the meetings, but I haven't heard that. But if you're going to put in on-street parking, the green space, based on the proportions and dimensions that are shown, it's not going to fit. So something seems like it's off.
I think we have that picture in the materials on the town.
Yep.
Nora, do you want to answer that?
So what I want to make clear is the plans are what was approved by this board, not a rendering. A rendering was prepared and considered in discussions and should be an accurate representation of what is going to be there, but it's the plans that were approved by the board, the site plans, the landscape plans, the parking plans. So the two-dimensional plans are what was approved and what is going to be carried out. The rendering should be consistent with those plans. It's a computer-generated image that's developed by putting those plans into the system. The view can be distorted, quite frankly, by the angle of the view. But the plans show very clear dimensions on the width of the parking spaces, the width of the landscaping. They note the types of landscaping, landscape materials that are going there. So if you can call up the plans themselves, it's all on the website from that project. It can also be reached through the town's project page. That might be easier than going through the planning board page.
Well, then it's useful, Abby, just to navigate that so that
Yeah.
people can find,
There it is.
so there is a
Projects.
projects link. I actually didn't know that was there. I've been searching through all the rest of the site to find this.
Oh.
It's off.
So if you go down to the bottom of that, there's a list of all the documents that are on the, well, there's one of the images. Keep going. Right there. So there's the,
Site plans.
those are the approved site plans. You can flip to the landscape plan.
Which one is that? Did I pass it already? Oh, yeah.
There you go. So you can see there's a landscaped area along School Street, and there's a landscaped area along Washington Street, and there's a sidewalk, and there are on-street parking spaces. All of that will be built as shown.
And just to add, that's what he has to build. That was the special permit that we approved.
I'll just say from a resident standpoint, from the flyer that was delivered, the visual flyer, the rendering.
A rendering is a marketing tool
Yeah,
used by the builder. That's
Right.
not what we approve.
yeah. I mean, it's what a lot of people are going based on. I think that's what's generating so much concern, that what everyone kind of was led to believe is probably, or based on that, is different than this, unfortunately.
I think also those renderings, one of the things, they didn't render any of the buildings that were already there, so it looks like it's out in the middle of the forest, which of course it's not. But, I mean, this plan should correspond, I mean, what's here is just a two-dimensional version of where the trees are. I mean, it should map to what's in that drawing. It's just right now, it'd be really hard to tell, right? Because everything's torn up, and I'm not sure where the lines would be from the sidewalk, if the curb is going to be in the same place. I don't know, but it's going to match this, and that's what everybody is going to build towards. And if there was a change, they would have to come to us to have it changed.
I think there'll be a fair amount of disappointment, because that is, the rendering is what's going around to everyone, especially in that area, so, but.
Well, I
thank you.
suggest people should stop sending the rendering around, because that's not what we approved.
Yeah, I assume it's the developer who sent it out. It came to all of us. Yeah, and that's, yeah.
Nora, do you know when they're going to put that retaining wall in the back? Where that house is, because that fence is sort of on the edge, and with all the rains and things?
So that's part of when, before they pave the parking lot. So that's in the first phase. So they will first build the CVS structure, and then they will tend to the parking lot and the landscaping, and the wall is part of the landscaping.
Okay, so that the end of construction is end of summer, or occupancy is summer 2019, so it's, the retaining wall will happen before the end of summer.
I would expect it would, yeah.
Yeah.
Certainly, the parking spaces that are closest to CVS will be done before CVS can open. And then the parking spaces that are behind where Wentworth Hall will be moved to, there's less urgency to put those parking spaces in because they're needed when Wentworth Hall is open. But the intention is to pave all of the parking lot at once. So they'll concentrate on CVS first, and then they will move onto the town property. And then that retaining wall you're talking about is at the back of the town property. So I imagine that will be done towards the end of the first stage. So sometime in 2019, whether that's late summer or into the fall, I can't give a more accurate date than that.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Nora. Thank you, Abby. Comprehensive plan update.
We have scheduled a vision session. That is Saturday, May 18th. This is open to anyone. There's some flyers in the back. It'll be starting at 11:30 at the Thurston Middle School in the cafeteria. So we are getting the word out with that. The committee met the first week in April, I think it was, to start planning for that. So they're working out the details. We're working with the consultant. So we invite you to that meeting and help us spread the word. Please, there'll be a vision session. So it'll be a brief presentation with food in the beginning, and then we'll break into small groups and have some discussion items. The survey closed last week. We had I think 811 responses. So we'll be getting those results posted soon, and they will also be briefly presented at the vision session in May.
All right, thanks, Abby. What else do we have before we sign the plans?
Nothing? Yeah, nothing. Do you want me to go over anything? Oh, the appeal at the tennis court lights, that was dismissed. So those, that case has gone away. Then the buildings at University Station, the first building for Pulte Homes is getting ready to open later this summer. That's underway. And then we should probably just double check your, typically in May, your first meeting after town meeting, at May 14th, we'd like to review your summer schedule. But if you were tonight, if you were able to at least, I think May 14th is the next meeting, then we are scheduled May 28th, if that still works for all the planning board members. because we are getting to the deadline, I think this week is for the May 28th meeting, so we need to.
Those work for me.
Okay.
Okay. All right, anything else? Do we need to, should we adjourn and then sign the papers, or do we need to?
Oh, right, yeah, you can adjourn.
A motion to adjourn?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Nope. We are adjourned.